would like to introduce ourselves. It's a company which is involved in the sherry casks making. Then I would like to cover the world of these so-called sherry wines. And finally, I would like to discuss, that we're talking about the casks market, the upheavals that are being committed in the market right now. And I'll be really pleased to get your questions at the end of the first. Obviously, I should start out the answer talking about ourselves. Our company is a company based in southern Spain, in Andalusia region. We've been in business for about 50 years, almost half a century. I should say we know what we are doing. We are skilled and specialized in barrels craft making. And we have an extensive and proven experience in what Oloroso and PX casks is about. Our casks meet public health criteria, and we are just located in Spain, but we have clients all around the world, basically in the States, Europe, and Asia. Obviously, we bet on our team as an asset, and we try to develop our duty by hand, if possible. So no machinery is very welcome, just in case. Our quality-price ratio may set us apart, since there are no intermediaries involved, and then no markups are included in the final price. We have been in the market almost half a century, as I said before, which means that we have a proven experience in the market. And our quality as primary objective, where we are among the few companies in Spain which are certified in quality. We hold the ISO quality standards, and obviously no sulfur is used in our process.
That's that bit that you just said, the no sulfur bit. If you're not familiar with sherry cask, that's super important. It's a really big problem in the whiskey community at large. People selling casks that mention sulfur. Sulfur is used to keep casks clean in terms of a winemaking process, but spirits pick it up super quickly. We once picked up some local red wine bottles like that, and it was terrible. So no sulfur, super important. That's good.
Yeah, thank you for the remark. Our assortment is basically virginal casks, seasoned in Oloroso and PX. For a certain period of time, I will tell about this later on. But also recoopered and reconditioned casks, ex-Oloroso, Fino, Untitled, PX, the ex-Cognac, Porto, Madeira, but also small formats. We also provide logistics services, not at our end. We are not a logistics company, but we are really committed to our clients not to worry about this. So, as long as they are interested in our casks, we can get a shipping schedule for them, so that they could just only worry about when my cask will be in destination, right? And as I said before, we are artisans, and we are really committed to keep on doing the things in the way we were doing time ago. We think artisan means taking good care of details. But what is that called sherry? Sherry, everybody talks about sherry, and plenty of people are curious about sherry, but the sherry may be more than one thing. Let me please get into this. This is obviously a Spanish wine appellation of origin in the Jerez area in southern Spain. British owners of cellars say. In fact, this is a trademark. Also, I think the name defining some wine varieties, but also a know-how, a way of producing wine in southern Spain, the way it has been done for years, for centuries. But also in some of the areas, apart from southern Spain, I mean, the USA, Australia, etc. This is about the areas where, let's call it, sherry-style wines are located. This is the homeland of sherry. Jerez, obviously, but also Condado de Huelva, Montilla, and Malaga. Our wines, the wines produced in this area, have an outstanding color and flavor. This is what I would like to remark. From Manzanilla, Fino, to Pedro Jimenez. Let me please remark, we're talking in terms of dryness versus sweetness. But what is that called sherry? Unfortunately, I didn't give some bottles with me just for you to try it. Maybe in the future, but not now. It's about 45 wines, the way Port and Madeira are, with a good number of varieties. Hence, sherry is not a type of wine. Please put this across. Oloroso, Untitled, Cream, Alberto, Moscatel, Jimenez, a huge variety. Time matters. For these wines, the way it matters for whiskey, for instance, it just takes 1 year time for you to get a whiskey in India, but 3 years time for you to get a whiskey in Scotland, for instance. Time matters for these wines in two ways, since there are two aging processes. Later on, the most prolonged time for these wines, the more organoleptic characteristics arise from these wines. These two ways are the oxidative agent, the biological agent as well. Oxidative agent means basically the wine gets in contact with air. The environment gets the wine in direct contact with oxygen so that it decreases in alcohol content, becomes gradually darker. It gets affected by transpiration. Not to mention, when we talk about casks, everything happens inside the cask. We are not talking about an air-proof item. Usually there's a natural transpiration. Biological aging comes in terms of getting a kind of a film of yeast known as belleflor. Belleflor would be translated from Spanish as a veil of flower. It's so poetic, but really important for this type of wine, since there's a microclimate with a biological layer of yeast that imparts some certain flavors to the final wine. Obviously protects from oxidation in the way that wine is not in direct contact with air, but also there's an interaction of the yeast and the liquids. So there's a growing consumption of alcohol, and there's an increase in the content of acetaldehyde, right? Let me please call your attention about these bits. This is how these casks are from inside when this veil of yeast appears. As you can see, there's a spare room inside the cask, which is air, and then this film of yeast and wine separated to each other. Air and wine separated by this film of yeast. But what is that called? I assume you ever heard about that. This is how we age our wines in Southern Spain. By this means, we just put casks in 3 levels. The lower level is called solera, coming from the Spanish name suelo, so ground. There's a mid-level and an upper level. What we do is just take in no more than 1/3 of these wines from the lower level, the oldest ones, and this wine taken is replaced by the, let's call it, mid-aged wine, and this by the upper level one. Okay, this wine taken is called rocío or saca. What we get is a mixture of different harvests, but also a mixture of different flavors and aromas that will be importing spirits, for instance. But the so-called sherry varieties are really outstanding and worth a visit. Let's visit it together. Let me please start by talking about Fino and Manzanilla. Fino and Manzanilla is more or less the same, but from different sherry areas. This is the driest wine compared with the final one, which will be the sweetest one. This is light, young. I would define it just like yellow straw, and pleasant in mouth, fresh and enjoyable. Not heavily fortified. This wine it could take about 5 to 10 years inside the cask. This is the driest, the palest wine that we could offer in this palette of flavors called sherry. Amontillado, I guess you ever heard about the cask of Amontillado, the Galapagos tale. Okay, it's about this. Amontillado means from Montilla. Montilla is one of the areas. It suffers 2 aging stages. It starts off similar to a Fino, which is a biological aging, but this bill is suppressed naturally or by fortifying, which means by adding alcohol. Then it gets a greater degree of alcohol strength, gets darker than Fino, and gets a good acidity, and therefore is very versatile. It should be about 20-25 years time of these wines inside the cask. This is salmon, this is darker than Fino, but lighter than Oloroso. And then it comes Oloroso, it's one of our favorites, I should say, and very good and suitable just for importing flavors to final spirits such as whiskey. Even darker than Amontillado, they are aged in wood, even longer than without this protection of floor, of belloy floor. So there's only one agent, which is the oxidative one. The belloy floor is suppressed by 45, but sometimes it just disappears after the time. They get deep, darker than Amontillado. They get toasty, I would say that even butterscotchy. So in terms of sweetness, dryness, it gets more sweet than dry. It should be about 20-25 years time inside the cask as well. So it's darker than Amontillado, but gets more natural glycerin. Palo Cortado, well, in fact, this is a mystery of wine, since it may be kind of an Amontillado in mouth, an Amontillado in nose, and Oloroso in mouth. In a certain period of time, the process is cut off, so that we get a new kind of wine, which is a mixture of 2 kinds of things, right? Compared with Fino, it has more sweet glycerin inside. Since this glycerin has not been consumed yet. It should be about 16 to 20 ABV, alcohol by volume, sorry. And here it is, PX. I love PX, and I think Max does. This is such an impressive boost of sweetness from a dessert wine. What we get in here is kind of a wine which has been degraded in alcohol just from the sun. The system that we get these wines from is called paseras, as we get the grape bunches on mats under the southern Spanish sun. And I should say by this time of the year, this is really hot. And we get grapes to become, grapes to become dry. Okay, in this intense and sweet and rich flavor is gotten directly from sun. I mean, this is a natural sweetness. In order to get these wines, what we do is just give in additional alcohol. So, encarizar, how we say in Spanish. Okay, so fortify. And what we get is a full strength, punches, full-bodied wine. I would say this wine is even tarry, but really good, really smoky. It's worth trying, really. Being much thicker and sweeter than the rest, this is really interesting just for importing sweetness to spirits such as whiskey. But what is that going on in the casks market? I would like to give an overview and share it with you. There's a control over the offer. Big companies are really hoarding up casks at present. There's a growing scarcity of sherry wine casks as well. And there's an overpricing, we should say. The less casks, the higher the price. And in addition, distillers cannot influence the process. They cannot control the casks making process from scratch, since they are given casks that they have to handle, but the casks have already been filled and made in the way suppliers did. In order to give an action, reaction, and response to the market needs, we just decided to set up to launch out a project that I would like to share with you. Our I+C department has been working on oxygenation, infiltration, soaking, and time, which is really important. We're facing a new scenario, so that we needed an action, reaction, response. Let me please share with you some videos about what we are doing right now. Firstly, what we do is just fill virginal casks in PX or Oloroso. That's all. We are just talking about the type of wine that we have been mentioning before. They get impart. Okay. Then what we do is keeping the wine inside the casks for 24 months time, so that wine could get to infiltrate inside the cask, inside the steak, the way we are right now suggesting. It could get into around 0.27 inches. And then, after this period of time, what we do is just, what we suggest for distillers is just to empty them and to fill casks with their spirits, so that distillers can take all flavors and aromas, all personality of these spirits, and impart these characteristics to their spirits, to their final whiskies, for instance. We can do it with brews as well. It makes sense. It's nothing special. We did not invent a fire, but this is something important right now in order to give outputs to the market. So new old casks. Okay. So going on with my explanation, here it is. Okay. This is about the real effects our process gets in a state after 2 years' time. Really important and really interesting for you to know. You as distillers could get to choose the type of wine, the type of wood, etc. as we will see later. Our mission basically is to give the market new custom-built mature casks in 24 months' time, since the market is running out of ex-sherry casks, of ex-Oloroso or ex-PX casks. All casks from all cellars are drawing to a close. They are about to become a collector's item. So, as you can figure out, collector's items are really expensive. And current distillers can't proceed in terms of getting made-to-measure custom-built casks. They could do it that way. Our vision is to get over shortages, to offer an exclusive and limited production. Notice we can only set orders to a limited extent, and to empower our clients to have something to say from scratch. This is about a real picture from one of our warehouses. Well, casks are being matured right now. And what we can offer is for the distilleries to proceed in terms of choosing the type of wine, the ex or Oloroso, even though we are open for new options, the type of wood, mostly American oak wood, the type of toasting, and cherry, the cask aging time, even though we recommend no more than 2 years time, and the casks format from 40 liters to 250 liters. In American gallons, it should be about from 10 to 66, more or less. And prior to finishing, let me please give you 3 core ideas. One of them is Oloroso and PX casks are reliable partners for your spirits. They may provide an almost boundless palette of flavors. When casks market is changing, things will never be the same in the future. And cask seasoning is the answer, is the solution for those distillers who would be interested in joining the Oloroso and PX world. And as I am sure about your commercial acumen, let me please tell you something. Your current, but also your coming clients are always looking for sensations. They never get enough. What we are really offering them is sensations through casks. So if you're interested in this problem, we will be open for talking in the future. Thank you very much for your time.
Can you guys hear me? Great. So my name is Matt Hoffman. I am the master distiller and one of the co-founders of Westland Distillery. We're in Seattle, Washington. We make single malt whiskey. That is all we do. We don't do any bourbon or rye or anything like that. We're a dedicated malt whiskey distillery. Sherry casks were one of the big things on our list of casks to get. We actually had to, at the time, go to Spain to find them and convince them to sell sherry casks in the United States, because nobody was doing it at the time. And what we found is we love the casks they give us, the no sulfur thing. I stand behind their products, which I don't say about everybody, so that's a really big thing. But I'm just going to kind of shoot through this and talk about like the practical applications of sherry wine cask and sherry wine maturation, and then the blending of sherry casks. Because that's, I've discovered, a super important thing to know how to do. So here we go. All right, so this is basically an arc that I've kind of envisioned in my head in terms of the way that sherry casks mature. Right? You've got your spirit in there. We have a malt spirits, double distilled traditional style. So if you have a weightier spirit, for example, if you have like a bourbon, a really heavy, oily spirit, there might be some deviation from this, or if you have another lighter spirit, you know. So these are not givens, but this is our experience. This is from real world examples here. So these are the first fill casks. These are coming directly to us, and so these aren't casks that we have reused again. But this is the 4 periods that I've broken this down to. The extraction period, the balancing period, peak balance period, and dominant period, the sherry dominant period. All right, so this is the extraction period. We have a mixture of 250 liter casks and 500 liter casks, so these what we call hogsheads and butts. The butts are getting really hard to find these days, so you might not, they do an awesome job of trying to source it, but like you said, the whole sherry business is just falling apart, which is super sad, I think. So go out and drink more sherry wine. I actually end each one of my tours at the distillery with a quick pitch for sherry wine, because it's super good. People need to discover it, and that way we can have more barrels. So in the 250 liter size and in the hogshead size, months 1 to 4 are this extraction period, and it's 1 to 9 months in the 500 liter size. What I discovered, originally trying to do a 3-month sherry cask finish, was that the spirit that I put into the casks got worse temporarily. And I was really puzzled because we hadn't done, everything we got from them was amazing, but we had never pulled it that quick. And so we didn't do the sherry finish. We just kept it in there. And what it smelled like is it smelled like you're getting the aroma of sherry, but it's cloying. It's basically kind of smells like Canadian whiskey, right? It's that like hyper sweet kind of ethanol complex. I really didn't enjoy it, and so we didn't bottle it. But this, I've come to know, is this period, this extraction period also exists in new oak as well. It's just much more dramatic, I think, in the sherry casks. So then you have the integration period. This is months 4 to 8 in the hogsheads. The cloying sweetness is definitely starting to come down. This is where you're also starting to be able to pick out the specific aromatics of things. One of the great things that they are doing is the profile of the Oloroso and the Beta Romanes is very, very easy to pick out. I don't know if any of you have had our Westland Sherrywood. I would encourage you to go out and find some. Because you can smell, the smell of the Oloroso is really prominent, and then the PX really comes through a lot on the palate. And so this is one of my favorite things about the sherry casks, is that it's not just generic sherry flavor, you can really pinpoint things out, and that's really cool. So that cloying sweetness, that Canadian whiskey super high sweetness thing is going away on the nose. And at this point, this is where you can start to use them for blending into other products. So this is the peak balance period. You'll note that I have a question mark there in 500 liter casks because I don't want to try to tell you something that I don't actually know. So we put stuff in 500 liter casks, and we're still seeing it build and build. So I don't know, there's a point where sherry casks go from really balanced, really well balanced. The sherry character is really good. It's very precise and delineated, as well as the original spirit from your substrate that you're distilling from, in our case, malt. So you're able to, at this point, this is when you have a really good, well-balanced whiskey. When we do single cask bottlings, sherry cask bottlings, this is pretty much the period that we try to pull from between like 24 to 30 months is when we've found that we like them the most. So this, if you're thinking about doing single cask releases, this is kind of the time. So then this is the sherry dominant period, and again we're sort of starting to get into this, and there's a potential maybe for a little bit more fluctuation, but really what we found is that the sherry becomes too sherry, and then it's harder to actually pick out like these specific aromatics from each varietal, whether it's PX or Oloroso or whatever it is. And this becomes your kind of prototypical sherry bomb. And there's nothing wrong with sherry bombs. I mean, they sell like hotcakes. It's just kind of, from a distiller's standpoint, to me it's less interesting. A sherry bomb, if you can take sherry character and put it in with the rest of your house style, I think that is the more compelling product. But sherry bombs do sell, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. Also, again, a really useful blending tool here, in the same way that a sherry bomb, you can toast a little bit of that into something else, and you can use that to kind of round out the flavor profile. It's really useful. All right, so we'll talk about finishing versus full-term maturation. Our Westland Sherrywood is a mixture of the stuff that was finishing. That's actually why we have the Westland Sherrywood, is because I was doing the finishing thing and we couldn't bottle it, so we blended these two together. So stuff that we finished for 9 months to a year in the 250 liter casks, as well as the stuff that's full-term maturation. So that was not in new oak, it wasn't in ex-bourbon, it was only in sherry casks. So full-term maturation, I think, is more traditional. Like the cask finish thing has certainly been promoted a lot within the last, 20, 30 years, in the Scottish whiskey industry in particular. So at this point, when you're doing a cask finish, there's less the barrel needs to do. When you put spirit into a cask, there's a lot of things that are going on. One of the big things is the subtractive reactions, the fixing of the rough spots in your product. That's a combination of oxidation and aging and char and stuff, tannins in the barrel. So the stuff that's going in there, you don't need the sherry casks to do anything to it. You just need them to add additional flavor to it, and that's a really cool place to be. So this, for me, this is where the peak balancing really comes into play at that 9 to 12 months in a hogshead. That's why we ended up doing it at a year finish, because that is where we still had the character from the original spirit. In our case, it was ex-bourbon and Bordeaux added together and then married for 1 year, and that was where the sherry balanced really well with all of the additional aromatics and flavors that we picked up in the first 2 years of maturation. So full term maturation. So this is a very different thing, because now you're also relying on the sherry casks to help you through the oxidation process, and that can be difficult, because a lot of the sherry casks, especially the ones that we're able to find these days, what's really exciting about what they're doing is the ability to use new oak that has sherry in there, because you need all of these other things in there, the tannin breakdown, which helps oxidation. You need all of this stuff to help the whiskey mature. I'm not talking about extraction at all. I'm just talking about the things that actually help the whiskey change in the cask. So with an older cask, you might end up over-extracting before you end up developing any flavor. You might have a ton of sherry notes, but you might also have some of that new make spirit fault to it. At least that's what I found. But great blending tool. We've been able to make this work with their casks. I don't know if anybody's here from Chicago, but they just picked up these minis, right? Picked up the cask 312, which is a Pedro Jimenez sherry cask. It's one of my personal favorites, full term maturation. It's about 30 months. It's awesome, awesome stuff. So, and again, with the full term maturation arc, that can sometimes span decades, and this is like traditional Scottish whiskey maturation. All right, so this sherry casks can kind of be divas a little bit, and I say that in the best possible way. When I went over to Scotland relatively recently, I met with a couple distillers over there, and they were talking about if they're going to do a sherry cask release, they vat and marry for a minimum of 9 to 12 months before they ever release it. And that was a little distressing to me, so that was one of the things I needed to do when I got home. So what I've noticed is that they're right. And it's something that now I know. So we're 8 to 10 months ahead of when we bottle the next step, which obviously presents some kind of planning problems. You have to be a year in advance. So, but that's okay. We're in the whiskey business. And then sometimes if you vat those together, you can see the stuff integrating or further coming out in the bottle. So our peated whiskey, which I like a lot, obviously, and there's one that won Best in Class last night. But this little tiny sherry thing snuck out after we had bottled it, and I mean, my big focus when I'm making whiskey is balance, right? Like I want to use sherry, but I don't want it to be just single note in one line, and I want it to be all of these things together. And that snuck out. It surprised me, and people tend to like it, but it's still one of those things that I just would have known. So now that is a thing that we keep in mind, and it's a really important thing. Sherry cask ideas, there it is. So yeah, I just basically said all of that. So this is the difference between Oloroso and Pedro Jimenez. These two are very, very different. It does have a lot of that aromatic sweetness that I was talking about before, which, if it's too much, can be unpleasant. But once it settles down, it's beautiful. It's got this really nice, nutty, like maple syrup, beautiful flavored profile. But it is dry, Oloroso, or mostly dry. It's certainly not as sweet as the PX. So that can be tricky with a blend. There's a lot of people who smell that sweetness. I'm just talking from my experience, but a lot of people who smell that sweetness, if they don't get it on the palate, they can be disappointed, which I thought was really interesting. We did a single cask release with an Oloroso, and people just love the nose. I mean, it sold really well, and again, big sherry bomb, but it was drier on the palate than people expected, and I think people wanted that kind of sticky sherry cask thing. So this is something to keep in mind. But yeah, you've got a lot of really nice grainy notes. Oloroso and PX, of the two, all the varietals that he was listing before, those work really, really well, in my opinion, with malt spirits. And we use roasted malts, brewer's malts in our whiskeys, and that flavor profile works really, really well together. So PX. So as Alberto alluded to a little bit, I am a big fan of PX. It's not something we really knew about until we went and found them, because Montilla, where they are, is a big PX house, or a big PX region. So it does the things that you think it does. If you haven't tasted PX, is super sweet, super rich. It's dessert wine. I mean, you can, at the very least, you can put it on ice cream, and it's really, really good. It's 20% alcohol by volume. It has the texture of a syrup. But we were getting the raisins and the molasses notes and the syrup stuff. We got that, and we were expecting that. But the other thing that we started getting is these kind of secondary and tertiary aromatics of ancho peppers and smoked paprika mole sauce. And I love that. It adds this totally different dimension to sherry cask maturation and to your whiskeys. So there's a lot of complexity there. I think my first thought would be this is going to be a sweet, hyper-sweet dessert wine. It's not going to have as much complexity as the Oloroso, but man, it's really good. You can get it if you go out and you buy a really old PX. You can taste it. You nose and taste. You can seek out those ancho peppers and that paprika thing. It's really, really cool. So the PX, because it's such a sweet, sticky dessert wine, adds a lot to the palate. I mean, it makes the whiskey sticky. That's for our Westland Sherrywood is part of our portfolio. It's one of the ones I think is the most approachable of our whiskeys because we blended in a little bit of PX, and we have a lot of people again who smell that sweet of the Oloroso on the nose, and then PX delivers on the palate. It's kind of a different way to go about it, but it works really, really well. It's been our kind of big seller recently. We only had it out for 4 months, but it just last night, if you guys weren't here, it took home double gold in the rest of the category, in the malt category. So it's been pretty well received, and we're very, very thankful for that. We're very happy with it. But a lot of that is the use of PX and Oloroso together. Get ahead of us. Yeah, so if we're going to use casks, we've done this. We've used some of their casks once before, and then we put them down for long-term maturation. People ask us all the time, which if you're a whiskey distiller, or if you're planning on getting into whiskey, you're going to get this question all the time, is, are you making anything that's going to be 10 years old? And we say, okay, yes, some stuff is getting laid down for a long time. But to me, the big focus is, again, on that maturation arc. You could throw malt whiskey in new oak for 10 years, but in my opinion, it's just going to taste like oak after that. It's not going to be good. It's not going to be better at 10 years than it is at 4, in my opinion. So what we want to do, we use first fill ex-bourbons or second fill, now ex-Westlands, and also ex-sherry casks that have been used once before for finishing. And this is our long-term stuff. This is where we see something that's going to go for 8, 10, 12 years. So that's, again, it's all about balance for me. It's balance between the sherry and the house style. We really like the Oloroso PX, but we're kind of pushing the sherrywood a little bit towards the PX direction because I'm trying to get a little bit more of the PX aromatics into the nose. Stylistically, I think that's really interesting, just because not a lot of people know about the PX aromatics, so we're going to kind of push it that way. Still keeping the Oloroso for sure, but the PX, we're big fans of it. And again, what we did is we did this blend of finishing casks and full-term casks, and originally we didn't set out to do this on purpose, which is the best thing about whiskey making sometimes, is things fall together in a funny way. But we really like how that has worked out because the first fill ex-bourbons and the new American oak developed a lot of malt flavor before it went into sherry casks, and the rest are kind of sherry, really well sherry balanced. So the end result is something that leads with sherry, mid-palate of malt, and then kind of ends with sherry. And we really like that result, and again, it's been very popular. So here it is. This is our Westland Sherrywood, available in fine retailers nationwide. And I think that was it. Yeah, I just wanted to go super quick, and then we could just jump into questions if you guys had any. Sorry. In the new oak, we use a mixture of number 3 and heavy toast light char 50-50 split. We use all air dried staves. That's super important. They're also air drying their staves. Any cooper you go to asks about air drying staves. It's critical. They were American oak, actually. But the sherry butts didn't get the actual butts. I mean, these are 80 years old on average. it's kind of amazing. They're almost terrifying to behold because they look so ancient. It's really, really cool. It's a very popular thing in the tasting room. We knocked out one of the heads of the sherry butt and replaced it with clear glass, so people can watch the sherry butt age over what will probably be many years. It's a very, very popular thing. Yeah.
Sherry's are in fact very complex. People do some studies on sherry characteristics and these disorders that are very, very complex. I think the Scottish whiskey industry actually still do it. They use a cheap approach to recharge sherry barrels. So the full sherry barrels are cheap, low grade sherry to reuse them again. I think that will probably make a big difference, but New York is still using that.
Pax I can't pronounce it properly. Well, this is the big thing, right? Is that everybody's running out of sherry casks. I mean, in a lot of cases, it's the distillers that are keeping the coopers and the winemakers in business because the demand for the cask is higher than the demand for the sherry wine itself. So I think as long as the approach is thoughtful and you're using good wine in there and good winemaking practices, and it's not just, well, this is the garbage wine, so this goes into the cask to season it. I think it's a thing that you have to approach with an open mind if you want sherry casks. Like right now, we're getting these great ex-Oloroso and ex-BX casks, but I do have full faith in buying their version of that, again, because they wouldn't sacrifice on quality.
You mentioned on airtime stage.
Yeah.
I know that the demand and the low Alberto they sort of accelerate the process a little bit. Can you speak to how long you prefer or are willing to take from stage, how long would be driving for?
Yeah, sure. We do. We don't do that. We don't do this. It's independent state that we get our casks from. We do 18-month for the number 3 char and 24-month for the heavy toast light char. And we started out with the kiln dried stuff and made the switch over to air dried, and the difference is incredible. Incredible, especially if you're going to non-chill filter your whiskeys, because the kiln dried stuff locks in that the resin right in the oak, and it's bitter. You can taste it on the palate. And when we stopped using it, which was pretty early on, it was gone. And the problem is that it's hard to get air dried staves these days. But to be honest with you, I'd rather not even use new oak. I would rather not go back to kiln dried. No, great thing about this. That's a great question. There's enough kind of sherry sloshing around in there that it keeps them hydrated. They ship all their casks whole, so like most sherry casks that are used in Scotland are taken apart in Spain first, and then put on pallets and sent out. There's some exceptions to that rule, but generally speaking, that's the case. But these are shipped whole, so it's still like a fresh done sherry that arrives, even though it's been a couple months coming across the ocean. And what's great about this, about the Oloroso BX in particular, is that because they're fortified, they don't turn into vinegar or anything like that. So it's strong enough that it can last the journey. So we don't have the they're in great shape. No, if we're going to do a finish or something like that, we're going to dump it, and we just put something in there. It would be less for the sherry for the second time. It would be more for long-term, low cask influence maturation. Yeah.
If I'm not incorrect, this may be a question for you. During sherry maturation itself, isn't there a period called rancio, that is a rancidity, it actually turns a little bit bad before it comes through? Could that be the same kind of thing you're seeing early on, as some kind of reaction taking place as a negative in the first few months, then mellow out, mature, and then you start to look at rich full flavors? Or is that maybe maturation slows?
Personally, I've never heard of that. It's definitely there for branding. I know that's part of branding it, but I haven't heard of that for sure.
Yeah.
Any other questions while we're here?
If the format is 250 liters and smaller, we're selling old casks, old vats, 10 liters for moisturized because it's still transportation.
Yeah, it's 5 liters as it goes in there. It's definitely enough to keep the inside of the barrel hydrated and humid. And I think it works really, really well. No, I don't. I dump that out. I'm actually taking that and I'm making a sherry wine vinegar out of it. I'm taking it, cutting it with water, and making a kind of Solera system of sherry wine vinegar in the distillery. It's kind of a cool thing. Or you can just drink a ton of sherry. That's also a cool thing. I think I can speak to that. I think it's too dry of a climate for botrytis. Is my understanding that it's just raisin shriveling, and it's the heat, that kind of ancho pepper and that paprika thing. That's the skin of the
That's it. There's kind of a paste that we get, a paste, and we fortify that with alcohol. I guess that's the question, the answer of the question. Yeah, we get a paste, okay? And this is, imagine, figure out the punch once dried under a terrible heat, so that you get something really that you can't handle without this spoon. Okay?
Any other questions? All right, thank you guys very much for coming, and